Everybody out there, and welcome to this week's HackSurfer Hangout. Pretty excited this week. We get to talk about kind of some fun stuff, the Internet of Things. Shane Dyer, the CEO of Arrayent, he got pulled away for a quick meeting, but we got their VP of Marketing, Abid Hussain, with us today. How's it going?
Good morning. Good morning to everyone out there.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm kind of excited to talk to you just because, kind of in sort of the geeky sort of nerd world of, cybersecurity in the future. You kind of imagine the Jetsons when you think the Internet of Things. So I guess, for the people out there, can you kind of maybe quick explain what your company does and sort of how it's related to the Internet of Things, just so they get a little background?
Absolutely. So most of you probably at least have heard about the Internet of Things and perhaps have some, some ideas, at least what it means to you. But Arrayent specifically, what we focus on is creating a platform, and platform in the truest sense. I know platform is probably an overused term in the industry, but when we say platform, we really mean end-to-end. And when you think about how things are being connected and going to be connected to the internet, you need a number of disciplines and a number of parts of the solution to create a full platform. And that's all the way from the thing through the device being connected, through the connectivity side, through to the cloud, through to the applications, both on the mobile and enterprise side. So we do the entire platform. We conceived the architecture from the beginning to be tuned towards the Internet of Things, and we have a markedly different approach than what you might see in what we call the IT world, as opposed to the IoT world, on how to get things connected versus getting computers connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess just kind of wondering, how you sort of define the Internet of Things. I mean, we kind of hear a lot about it. Sometimes it seems like a really broad term. I mean, can you just maybe kind of explain sort of the concept of what it is?
Absolutely. The Internet of Things has been around for a long time, and it's been called something different for a long time. And it was known as, among other things, M-to-M, machine-to-machine communication. That has existed for a very long time, which fundamentally at its core is similar to Internet of Things. Internet of Things actually takes this thing to a much broader stage and starts connecting primarily consumer goods that are broadly deployed, have different use cases, or use cases that apply to the end user, not just machine-to-machine communications. The user now comes in and essentially has to be at a good cost point, because these have to fit into consumer goods that people are going to buy at all price points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of articles, you kind of read about how, things are changing and all these devices are going to be connected. I guess in kind of my world, my house at least, I don't really have sort of any of that technology yet. Just curious if you kind of have a timeline, of how far out you think it'll be before, you hear about self-driving cars and, stoves you can operate with your smartphone and things like that. I mean, is there, I guess, do you see like widespread adoption anytime in the near future?
Well, from a consumer perspective, we can basically look at the watershed event, and the watershed event was Nest and the learning thermostat, and we think that is sort of opening the door to consumers understanding how IoT can apply to them, and the product categories that are going to be converted, if you will, and see customer adoption are going to be, there are a number of them. For example, one of our customers is Chamberlain Garage Doors, and the garage door is a great use case for, I think anybody who owns a garage door would agree that if you had remote control of your garage door and far remote control, for example, you're driving halfway up to the ski resort and you forgot if you closed your garage door, it's quite useful to be able to A, know that it's open or closed, and B, be able to close it. And those very, very compelling use cases we believe, will be driving the end user adoption. And I say that, and I'll give you a counterpoint. What we don't believe is that people are going to be buying entire home automation systems. And there are some that exist out there where somebody says, oh, I'm going to go in and automate my home on this Sunday afternoon, and they go to the store and buy an entire home automation system. We believe that is not the prevalent adoption model, and that's essentially been proven out by market performance of some of the home automation systems.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people must be interested in Internet of Things because we got quite a few questions kind of popping in different places. So I guess I'll get to those. And Amy, she wants to know, she says she's read a lot of articles about smart fridges sending out spam, but what kind of other threats can be expected from the Internet of Things?
Well, I'm actually glad that Amy asked that question, because it does essentially speak to a very specific architectural decision that you may take when you're implementing the Internet of Things. Fundamentally, and I'm going to really grossly oversimplify this and to make a point. Fundamentally, do you want your fridge to be a fridge, or do you want it to be a computer? And it's a bit of a rhetorical question. And if you make it a computer, meaning you add a computer function to your fridge, then the vulnerability and the resources available to do malware and deploy malware is similar to that of a computer. And in fact, if you put an email server in your fridge, and even if it's deactivated or not part of the use case of that connected fridge, if somebody gets in, if a hacker gets in, then you are essentially giving them the keys to an email a spam server. We believe if you're building that connected device, you should not go about it that way. What you should do is create a very, very small bit of embedded code, and not computer but hardware, maybe not even an OS. In fact, we believe the OS is not necessary. And keep the cost low, keep the vulnerability low. Of course, you should encrypt. Our platform has encryption, but it's not so much about encryption. It's about, if you're going to have 50 billion or 100 billion devices deployed, why make those 100 billion devices have the resources that aren't necessary for the use case, but can be exploited in a malicious way? I hope that answers Amy's question. I think it is what she was asking.
Yeah, kind of following up on that, Crispin, he says, ironically, the smart-enabled things I would most benefit from, things like doors, a safe, vehicle location, those are the things I refuse to smart-enable because of the cybersecurity implications. Can I trust the security of this data when the impact can be so high?
Well, I guess I can answer that two ways. I'm not sure if the question is about the security of the control of these devices, or the security of the data once it ends up in a database. And I think I can answer both of the questions. First is security of the actual control of those devices. I think I sort of answered in my first question is, you have the encryption, and you also have a small, simple, relatively unhackable endpoint, or the device, and you keep the complexity or the virtual machine up in the cloud. Now, is that cloud itself secure? Well, it's secure to the extent that we trust online banking, that we trust all of our Facebook information. So if you trust the cloud to any degree, then the cloud is as secure as you trust to do your banking or your e-commerce. The real question, the real new question for IoT is, how secure are the endpoints? And we believe that the architecture that we promote and implement is more secure than it would be if you were to implement standard IT or computing methods.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then I guess keep going with these questions here. If you got anyone's watching and they have any questions, you can submit them on the Google app, or you can tweet them to @JeffRyanPeters, and we'll try to get to them. Sam, he wants to know, he says, people already seem to be trusting in what they share on the internet. As everything comes online and gets connected, that will only get worse. How do you see the issue of trust and privacy affecting the Internet of Things?
Well, when it comes to trust and privacy, and this is, I'll answer this in a way that's actually even broader than IoT, but then get specific about IoT. When it comes to trust and privacy on the internet, and I touched on it in the last question, fundamentally, businesses that are expecting the consumer to give their information must deliver value greater than the privacy or the cost of that privacy. And that sounds like it's obvious, but it may not be quite as obvious. As a consumer becomes more and more savvy, in the early days, of course, businesses could probably do what they wanted, but as a consumer becomes more savvy, the enterprise is going to be required to deliver significant value that is commensurate or greater than what the cost is of giving up that privacy, or the perceived cost. Now, when it comes to IoT, that is why the use cases are so important. You must deliver a use case that is so valuable that you don't mind giving up your personal information. Very much like, for example, Facebook, right? You gave up a lot of personal information, but you're getting so much value as a user and that's why they've grown. So we believe IoT will grow. Use cases will drive it, and the products that can deliver those kind of use cases will be adopted first. Probably some products, those use cases haven't been figured out yet because they may be a little elusive, because they may be a way to use a product that was never used before because it wouldn't have been without connectivity. So there's going to be new areas for sure, but fundamentally, enterprise will have to deliver a value to the consumer to get the consumer to give their data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's one question I kind of wanted to get your opinion on. You know, as someone who kind of works, you know, in the Internet of Things field, you know, a lot of times you see studies kind of predicting all these horrible things. One thing I just recently read, it was IID. They predict that the following will happen by the end of 2015. They say the once optimistic concept of the Internet of Things, where virtually everything electronically is conveniently connected to the Internet, will reveal its dark side. Malicious hackers will have the power to provoke chaos inside your home, burning your house down by hacking your oven to flood your house with gas and ignite it, or remotely turning off your security system to allow burglars inside. So when you hear stuff like that, I'm just curious your thoughts on it.
Well, you know, it's interesting, Jeff. I've been in this industry through a couple of what I would call major technology shift cycles, and I can say that I'm old enough to remember that I had a very similar thought when it came to the first online e-commerce, where you would enter your credit card into a website. And I remember there were people saying, nobody will ever enter a credit card into a website. Well, the fact is, there were a lot of people who didn't because they were afraid, until they realized that, guess what, secure socket layer was secure. And yes, there have been hack accounts, but if you look at the value of e-commerce versus the number, the negative value of the number of instances of those hacking events, you say, you know, obviously the world has converted. So we believe it's going to be the same for IoT. Yes, of course, there will probably be hack attempts. And frankly, the platforms that have the most hardness, if you will, to those hack attacks will be the ones that will prevail in to be able to win the trust of the consumers.
Mm-hmm. But Richard out there, he wants to know, do you see the Internet of Things as just the start to something even more mainstream, to the point where even outside the home, everything you interact with is connected? If so, how much more or less of a cyber footprint will this make for cybercrime exploits?
Well, that's actually an interesting question. You know, today, Arrayent is focused pretty much on what you might call static deployments, you know, home and your local static environment, because there's just so much fertile ground for converting that to IoT. Whether IoT becomes, in a way, it's sort of, that question sort of says, well, you know, how does the mobile environment overlap in this? In some ways, your mobile smartphone is a network of IoTs in a way, because yes, your smartphone is talking to the network often, and not only is it a compute device, but it's sort of an IoT device as well. But I think that's the question, unless I misunderstood it. Yes, absolutely, there's definitely overlap and potential for expansion beyond, say, the home or the static environment.
Mm-hmm. Then we have a few questions out there kind of about, kind of regulation. We were talking to Kevin Epstein from Proofpoint a couple months ago. They did the whole study. There's sort of a botnet involving a fridge and smart TVs and stuff that was kind of in the news. And we kind of asked him about, who is sort of responsible, and, it was kind of a sort of, I guess, a murky question, because, if I'm a consumer and my TV's infected, I mean, really, what does that matter to me? I can still watch TV on it. So I guess that's kind of the question that a couple people sort of have. For example, Monica, she says, do you think there will be an entirely new entity in regards to protection for home appliances for cybercrime?
Well, if you, I mean, this is a little bit of sort of looking into the crystal ball, but definitely I predict there will be entities that will provide services around securing IoT devices. I can't imagine that industry would not evolve from the IT security industry, much like antivirus industry evolved in the PC client server business. As far as who's responsible, I think it's going to depend on a case-by-case basis. For example, if your connected devices are provided to you through a service provider, for example, like you might get a service from a Comcast or Verizon, the responsibility may fall on them to secure their network in a way. Maybe not, you can watch TV, but that connected device is now part of a network in addition to being a TV in your home, right? So then the responsibility may fall on them. I'm not sure if the question was, would there be legislation around, who's responsible? I don't expect that it would be much different than how responsibility falls in IT and IT networks.
Yeah, that's kind of another question that Richard has. He kind of wanted to know, as this kind of stuff, gets going and you kind of hear those worst case scenarios like I was describing earlier. Do you think new regulations will be needed or anything will kind of happen as kind of the thing sort of expands?
Well, I'm not an expert in government affairs when it comes to technology, but I would say that I think I'll leave it at I expect that it'll be an offshoot of how IT cybersecurity has been governed. Even though the architecture, as I pointed out before, will be different, I think that when it comes to legislation or regulations, these are consumer goods, and perhaps there will be more, for a product that's making something mission critical or potentially has significant safety or life-threatening impacts. Maybe they'll have higher legislation or regulation around those.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess just one thing, I guess a lot of people sort of think of the Internet of Things, they sort of think of, like the connected fridge, the smart TV, but I think it kind of goes sort of a lot broader than that. Like, for example, I was reading some stuff by Jeremy Rifkin. He sort of talks a lot about the Internet of Things and sort of the future, and he was talking about how there's 13 billion sensors today. IBM predicts that by 2020 there'll be 30 billion, and by 2030 there could be as many as 100 trillion. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. Someone on Twitter was kind of saying they didn't really see that cybercrime would sort of, and the Internet of Things would really kind of accelerate cybercrime, but when you see a stat like that going from 13 billion to 100 trillion over the next 15 years, it sort of seems like something's going to have to change, or it's going to affect it somehow. So not to make you sort of predict the future, but I'm just curious, if there's any sort of particular threats or kind of things you see kind of coming over the next, decade as that sort of really booms.
Sure. I'll go back to kind of one of the earlier questions about fundamentally, how do you make these things? And the reference was to a refrigerator with an email server, keeping that simple. But now we talk about sensors that are even more simple, and the use case for a sensor is much less complex than the use case for example, a home appliance like a fridge. So there it becomes even more important that you right-size the connected portion of that sensor. So when you take an unconnected sensor and make it a connected sensor, you want to put in just enough resources to make it connected so that when you're talking about, I'm not going to argue about the number, whether it's 50 billion or 100 billion or a trillion. When you're talking about that scale, your number of endpoints, literally we like to say there's not enough IT resources in the world to actively manage that many endpoints. I mean, just imagine trying, IT resources in the world have a hard time securing all the mobile phones and tablets and PCs that are out there and making so we believe that a different approach is required, and fundamentally the IoT, especially the really simple and broadly deployed IoT devices like sensors, will have to be intrinsically secure. And of course that doesn't speak to anything on the cloud side. The cloud, if your cloud is managing a very, very large deployment, the cloud may require new methods of security that haven't been devised yet. But that's more of an IT question, more so than an IoT question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you kind of addressed this question that Crispin has, but I'll sort of ask it anyways. It says, GE doesn't spend much effort on my oven's clock. It's kind of a secondary feature, and he sort of anticipates it's the same thing, with adding Wi-Fi to it. Can we ever expect these devices to treat their network security as important, or will they purchase minimal cost antennas and just throw them in?
Well, so I don't have to predict on this one because it's already happening. So there are devices that are being created as sort of hey, let's just throw a Wi-Fi and a Linux or an Android computer in there and call it connected. And the fact is, it is connected, but is it connected in the right way? And I'm not sure exactly what the reference is to the clock, but I think I know what Crispin means here. How much thought are these appliance manufacturers, for example, going to put into the connectivity? And the fact is, not all enterprises are created equal. Some are very thoughtful and deliberate about how they go about a new technology like IoT, and others literally don't know what to do except that, hey, my competitor is going to have a connected device. I got to get connected. So Arrayent's been in this business since 2005 in the IoT business, before it was really a popular term. But we've spent a lot of time connecting various different devices, from sump pumps to water filters to refrigerators to garage door openers. And again, getting back to the use cases, we believe that the advocacy for suppliers like Arrayent, the advocacy requirement is going to be to counsel these thing makers who have not made connected devices what's the right way to do it, so that they don't end up with a underperforming or a vulnerable system.
Yeah, so as you I imagine you kind of have a little interaction with some of these companies. As you talk to them, is there any, do they have any particular concerns about cybersecurity or cybercrime? As you guys are sort of talking, or is it anything like that?
Well, definitely they want basic encryption, which everybody wants in these types of applications. But we definitely had conversations about why our architecture or our platform was chosen due to its intrinsic security. And let me put a fine point on that, because I talked about it generally. So, for example, Arrayent's platform puts the complexity and the virtualization of the machines into the cloud, while the endpoints are essentially very, very simple and small footprint. Small footprint both from a hardware and a software perspective. Our platform also works on multiple radio technology, whether it be Wi-Fi, Zigbee, Z-Wave, and 900 megahertz. The issue here is, some platforms take what we call the easy way out, and what I mean by that is that, hey, Wi-Fi is ubiquitous. Okay, put a Wi-Fi radio on there. Well, how does that speak to battery life? How does that speak to range? Well, if you're taking the easy way out, it's Wi-Fi and some sort of a Linux kernel, maybe an Android stack, and that may not be the right way. That may require more resources at the endpoint than you really want to have the cost. So, securing those endpoints is about choosing the right architecture as much as it is about encryption.
Mm-hmm. Two more questions here, if you got time. From Eric, he says he's kind of got a silly question, but do you think anyone will ever come up with a good term to replace Internet of Things? It seems to me that nearly everyone hates the term, but can't figure out a better one.
Yeah, the answer to that is absolutely yes. You're going to probably see 10 different names, and it's going to confuse everyone probably. And even though you hate Internet of Things, my prediction, this is just my personal prediction, everyone will come back to the Internet of Things. Cisco coined the term called Internet of Everything, which is basically the same thing. But it's if you really believe that there's going to be 100 billion things, and mean that in the most general sense, because if it's 100 billion, it can't be any one category, then there will be no other word better than things. That's my personal prediction, but we'll see.
And then final question, sort of one question we kind of ask, every security person we talk to, because at HackSurfer, we're kind of all about cybercrime made simple, and a lot of people are sort of really confused where to start. So this really isn't related to Internet of Things, but say you're a business person, or, you own a small business, and you're just really confused about cybersecurity. You don't even really know where to start. Do you just kind of have any practical advice for where someone like in that position should start thinking about cybersecurity?
I'm sorry. Let me make sure I understand the question. Was the question what would be advice to, say, a small business owner about cybersecurity in general, or cybersecurity applied to Internet of Things?
No, just in general. It's kind of one topic we kind of like to ask everyone and kind of get everyone's opinion on, because that's kind of what we guys notice quite a bit is there is a lot of confusion out there. So yeah, just in general, if there's any sort of practical, like 1 or 2 tips you could give.
Sure, and this is I think this is good advice for any business, but especially small businesses. If you're going to employ platforms or devices or services that are going to open yourself up to vulnerabilities, make sure you're getting good value. Make sure your use case is strong, such that, because everything is a trade-off, and choose the right platform, which is important, and make sure that your use case is compelling, and then it makes any risk that you take worthwhile, because you can't eliminate the risks.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate you coming on and explaining other things to us.
Thank you very much for accommodating me today.
Yeah. All right. We'll see all you guys next week. We'll do this again. We do it every Friday, so feel free to pop by HackSurfer.com every Friday.